Are you ready to turn your investments into retirement income? Listen in as Jeremy, Keil, and his guests reveal ways you can make smarter retirement, investment, and tax planning decisions to achieve your ideal retirement. You will learn more about your money so you can feel better about your money and make better money decisions. Now, on to the show.
Welcome to Retirement Revealed. I'm your host, Jeremy Keil, and we're here to turn your retirement savings into a consistent income. And we're excited today to have someone on the show talking about I-bonds and other types of government securities. We've got Dave Enna on the line, and he founded tipswatch.com. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, glad you could make it out. I'm just curious here, what is TipsWatch? How did you even get interested? Why did you start a blog about Treasury Inflation-Protected Securities?
Well, I was working at a newspaper website, and we were doing a lot of stuff with blogs, and I decided I would start one just to see how it works, more or less. Mm-hmm. And this is one area I was really interested in, both I-bonds and TIPS. And so I started it in March 2011. And it was obviously very small. I didn't even know if I would continue doing it, but I got very interested in doing it over time and kept doing it. And so I have covered every TIPS auction since March 2011. There's one every month.
Wow.
And of course, all the I-bond, I track all the I-bond inflation numbers. Yeah. And it's really, for me, it became a way of buying TIPS when I could monitor the auctions.
Sure.
And then I could tell this is a good time to buy or not a good time to buy. I was going to be doing it anyway, so it was fun to write. And then about 6 years ago, Seeking Alpha recruited me to write for their website.
Okay.
And I was their number one writer on bonds for probably 4 years.
Wow.
But then they changed their pay structure, and my pay basically was cut by 90%. If you're not in, they're favoring writing about tickers. So if you write about Tesla, you can make a lot of money. But I-bonds and TIPS don't have a ticker and can't make any money. So I just converted back last year to just strictly writing on my own website and running advertising on it and letting that pay the bills.
Yeah. Oh, that's fun. Well, it's just great. It just goes to show that if you have a passion for something, you can perhaps turn it into a business. We got connected because of your website. So I imagine that this is a way to get connected to other folks that have an interest in the things that you're interested in as well. You mentioned a few different things there. I call them Treasury Inflation-Protected Securities. You call them TIPS. They're both the same thing. I imagine a lot of the people that are listening have not quite heard of it, or maybe they're just heard the name but not quite sure exactly what those are. Would you mind describing for us maybe the differences between a TIPS, which is the type of security, versus an I-bond, versus maybe just a regular old savings bond or regular government bond? There's kind of these almost flip-flop different things that are out there. Do you mind describing that out for us a little bit?
Well, the savings bonds and TIPS are both government securities, so they're 100% guaranteed unless the government defaults. So we hope that won't happen.
Yeah, for sure.
TIPS is a traditional U.S. Treasury, except that it's it pays a very small coupon rate. Now, right now, TIPS that you buy today will pay a coupon rate of 0.125%. And then the amount, let's say you buy $10,000. If inflation goes up every month, then your principal balance goes up along with the inflation rate. It also can go down with the inflation rate, though. If the inflation rate goes down, your accrued balance will go down for a month, matching the deflation of the month before. TIPS are a great investment. The problem right now is that real yields on TIPS are well below zero. So you're getting less than the inflation rate. So when you say zero, it doesn't mean you're earning a negative return. You're just returning negative to inflation, not negative to not a nominal negative return.
Yeah, I'll just make up some numbers. So like if with a TIP, if inflation was 3 and you're getting like 2 or 1, you'd say, well, wait a second, we're behind inflation. That's kind of how the TIPS could work.
That's right.
And that's what happening is right now.
And
okay. Got it.
It sounds bad, but then again, if you bought a 10-year Treasury right now, you're going to get 1.5%, let's say. That is likely to fail to lag inflation by 1%, 2%, 3%. We don't know how much inflation will be in the future. So at least with the tips, you're guaranteed to get. Right now, it's just about 1% below inflation for a 10-year tips. It's 0.9% below.
Yeah.
The nice thing about an I bond is it will never perform less than the rate of inflation. Never. So it's going to. Right now, the fixed rate is 0.0%. You will get, that means that your real rate of return is 0 instead of negative 1%. So that's a 100 basis point advantage for an I bond. For a 5-year tips, it's negative 1.5. So an I bond has an advantage of 150 basis points. And that's a real lot of advantage. And then the other thing about I bonds is they can never go down in value. So if the deflation does strike for months, you're going to earn, if it's potentially, you could earn 0% for 6 months.
Sure.
But if inflation had gone down by, let's say, 2%, you're still 2% above inflation. So that's not so bad. Tips, will go down 2% with it. Yeah. So tips are going to be more sensitive to what inflation does. I bonds, when it goes down, I bonds will only go up. They can only go up. They can't go down.
Yeah. Well, that ability for I bonds not to go down is just a great additive. It's a great thing. That's somewhat what got us talking here. Is back in May of 2021, I start reading all these articles about how I bonds are going to pay this great rate for the next 6 months. And some people listening are saying, wait a second, Dave was talking about real returns of 0. Well, oddly enough, a real return of 0 keeping up with inflation is actually pretty good right now. A lot of people that we're talking to have money in the bank. They're looking at accounts that are paying close to 0. They're seeing headlines that say inflation might be 5 or 6% right now, if that's to be believed. But let's just go with that number. And you're thinking, wait a second, if you're 5 or 6 points behind inflation with your bank account, then the tips being behind by 1.5, or I bonds keeping up with inflation, that's the whole point for parts of your money that you might not want to have at risk for inflation. That's looking all right.
Yeah, the way that an I bond works is it has the fixed rate, which is 0.0% right now. That will be adjusted on November 1 to, I'm predicting 0.0%. So it won't change, in other words, because it's not going to go up when real yields are so low. But it also has a inflation adjusted rate, and the two rates combine to create a composite rate. The current composite rate, if you buy before October 30th, 31st, is 3.54% for 6 months. So you're going to get an annual rate of 3.54% for 6 months. The next variable rate, which is going to be reset on November 1, and it's based on inflation from March to September, looks like it's going to be close to 7%. Close. Wow. It may not be 7%, but right now it's on a track to be 6.56%. And then it could be so what that is it's double the inflation rate from March to September. Right now that inflation rate's running at about 3.28%, I think. Right. So if you add another 0.2, let's say for September, which is coming out in 2 weeks or 10 days, I think, you're going to end up with a rate very close to 7%.
That's what's so interesting about a lot of this is you said they're resetting the rate in November. I believe they're not even going to announce the rate in November. But if you pay attention, all the numbers that they use are being released on October 13th. And here we are recording just a little bit before then. I imagine the people listening now are going to hear this in October. After October 13th, you can go and find exactly what the rates are going to be. I got a feeling that on your website, thetipswatch.com, you're going to write an article about that.
I'm going to have a very busy day on October 13th because it's also the day that it's going to set the Social Security COLA that day too. And that is looking like it's going to be about 5.9% or I said 6, but it's not going to quite make 6, I don't think, but it could.
Sure.
So that's a big one too. I mean, for people on Social Security, I am on Social Security. It's nice to get that big of a gain, but the way that the Social Security COLA is figured is so complex. I don't want to talk about it, but
Yeah,
you can read about that on my
that'll be
site.
another one.
What
That's
happens
one thing
on
I love
October?
about your website. You've got that Social Security COLA. So people that are interested in the I-bonds can go to your website, click on, you've got a whole section on it. People that are on Social Security or just about to be, I've been talking to so many people that are getting close to starting Social Security. And their biggest question, I think, is what is the increase going to be? And do I have to file before the end of the year in order to get that COLA adjustment? And I say, well, it looks like people like Dave say it's going to be close to 6. And I got a feeling you know exactly how the COLA works because, like you said, you're on Social Security making use of it right now.
I do explain how the COLA works, which is really complicated, and you'll probably never read exactly how it works anywhere else. I am amazed kind of that you can never really see how it works, but it's a very complicated formula that involves only 3 months. But the thing is, you don't need to start taking Social Security anytime. You'll get the 6% when you do claim. So your future benefits are going up by 6%.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if you're on it or not. Yeah, it is wonderful because it's been, for many years, it's been in the range of 1. I think last year was 1.8. Now, what's going to also, the last, on October 13th, will be the last of the 6-month string to determine the I-bonds rate. And that's the reason that one's so it's really the most important inflation report of the year. The numbers are a little bit different. The Social Security COLA uses the CPI-W, which isn't the same as CPI-U, is what you normally hear. And I-bond uses non-seasonally adjusted CPI-U, which you don't hear reported, but you know it is there in the monthly report. That's where I get it from.
Well, thank goodness we have people like you that are doing the calculations, doing a little bit of my research, and then following your website. I was able to do some of the calculations too, and turned out my numbers were pretty close. You corrected some of my numbers, which I thought was wonderful. I appreciate that. But you've got on your website something called the I-Bond Manifesto, why inflation-linked savings bonds can work as part of your emergency fund. And you wrote that or published that with a few other people that are famous in the I-bonds world. And I've been talking about I-bonds now the last few weeks, wrote an article about it, about how great it's looking like the November inflation adjustment might be, which means our opinion is that October might be a great time to look into it, because then if you know what the current rate is and you know what the next rate is, you can know what the next amount would be you would get over the next 12 to 15 months, which would be a great thing to know when you're going into exactly something like an I-bonds.
People should realize that if they buy before October 31st, they will get 3.54% for 6 months, for a full 6 months. Then they'll get the new rate, which may be near 7% for a full 6 months. So whenever you buy an I-bond, you immediately get the current rate for 6 months, and then you get the next rate for 6 months, and then we don't know what the next rate will be after that because it'll be inflation next year. Next year's inflation. It was Professor Z. Bodie, who's really well known in safety investing, and he was kind of like the father of I-bonds, they say, at least and I believe that he really got this started, the I-bond manifesto. What he's trying to do is to get people to realize that you can use an I-bond as a short-term investment instead of normally. I totally recommend using them as a long-term investment. Don't sell them until you need the money. But you can buy an I-bond in October and you can sell it 11 months later or redeem it, and you'll get the full year of interest except they remove 3 months of interest. So that's why I've been saying wait 15 months because that's the high interest rate you'd be losing. He brought together these people, including me, to talk about I-bonds, and it's just a really good summary of why I-bonds can be used as an emergency fund or as part of your emergency fund, not the full. I wouldn't recommend them as the full emergency fund. But if you're trying to say in retirement you want to have $50,000 set aside for future expenses, you could have a portion of that in I-bonds. Let's say $10,000. You could buy the limit, $10,000. And then after a year, if you needed the money, you could redeem them. If you didn't need the money, you could continue to let them grow, which is what I recommend. But I just recommend don't sell them until you need the money.
Sure. What's interesting, I've been talking about the I bonds and mentioning that the October 12-month yield might be around 5%. And some people said, who needs 5% when you can make more than that in the stock market? And I'm saying this has nothing to do with the stock market. It has to do with maybe your short-term type of money. And then someone had responded to me and said, well, I'd like to be able to cash out in less than 12 months for my emergency fund type money. And so that may be true, but there's plenty of people I know in retirement that they'll go with that 50,000 number that you talked about. What if you hit retirement, you need or want 50,000 in your emergency fund, and you keep it in a bank or a money market, and then 5 years later, 10 years later, 30 years later, you might have the same exact 50 grand in your emergency fund, and it might be in that money market that entire time. And we look here, it's 2021. That money market's been earning close to zero for 12 years. And so a lot of people that have what if type of money, the what if doesn't necessarily happen. And so it's a great idea to try to get a little bit more interest on that what if type of money. And yeah, if you had 50,000 of your what if emergency fund type of money, and yes, 10,000 is the maximum per person per year, perhaps you take 10 grand of it and move it into the I bonds if that's what works out best for you. Because then a year later, it's basically just as liquid as the other money that you had, but now you've earned that higher interest for that year. And then you can decide you can decide basically on a daily basis if you want to keep that portion of money in the I bond, or if you need it to cash it out, like you were talking about, to cash it out when you need it.
I totally agree with what you just said. That's exactly the way you should think about it. Let's say you really wanted $50,000 emergency fund, but let's say you had $30,000 in I bonds on top of the 50, and then if, at that time that would always be there if you needed the money. It would be there. It's going to earn the rate of inflation. It very accurately will track inflation, by the way. I have tested that.
Yeah.
Very accurately tracks. Now, when you redeem, you will owe taxes. So
sure.
You have to consider that. But you can time the sale in a year that you don't have a lot of income, hopefully, and not pay very much in taxes, or maybe none, or maybe no taxes. Now, the stock market is not an emergency fund. Everybody needs to remember that, because even though we've had so many years of rising stock market, it's not going to it will not continue. I mean, it's going to eventually we will go down. It'll go up again, but it'll go down at some point. Could be severe.
Yep.
That's when you want to have the emergency fund, so you don't have to sell the stocks. You can just let the stocks ride it out and go up in value.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I get to see more financial statements than perhaps you do, but I've just recently thinking of one where somebody said, oh, this is my emergency fund, and it was $30,000 in Apple stock. I said, I'm glad you have stock that you like, but that's definitely not your emergency fund. And then I had another person recently, and they were saying that, hey, this is my statement for my money market. And I was expecting to see a bank statement that showed an interest rate, and it was a brokerage account that had 80% in the stock market. And I said, wait a second, this is not your money market. I said, oh yeah, it is, because they had taken their money market and they were tired of the interest rate, and so they started investing. And so they view it like their money market, their emergency fund. And so, well, you've been lucky the last 12 years, right? From 2009 to 2021, it's worked out for you. But let's figure out if this really is your emergency fund money, because 80% in the stock market is definitely not an emergency fund type of money. It's having money available that you don't see the funds drop, so that if you do need the money, you know it's there. That's the whole point of an emergency fund. And love how you're talking about, and that you and Svi Bodhi have put out this manifesto, that I bonds could be a great component to your emergency fund.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm worried about anybody who thinks the stock market's their emergency fund. And especially, I love Apple's a great company, but I'm fine with owning Apple stock. It just can't be your emergency fund.
Yeah, definitely.
I can tell you that
should not be.
If you go back to 2013, when interest rates started going up, the bond market also took quite a hit. That won't happen with I bonds. Your I bonds. Let's say you just have even total bond market, which is a great fund. Vanguard's total bond market. That fund could take a 3 to 5% hit if interest rates go up in the next year.
Sure.
I-bonds won't take a hit. Then, but my wife and I, after interest rates did go up, when you could earn 3% on a 5-year CD. Remember that? It was like 3 years ago.
Right.
But we were making, let's say, a couple $100 on our money market fund a month, and now we're making about 5 cents. That's pretty severe drop, and that's why I think people are trying to take risks. They're taking risks when they shouldn't be because of that.
Yep, that's exactly it. Well, I'd encourage people to go to your website. Part of this I-bond manifesto is that it talks about 8 different benefits of the I-bonds. I'll highlight a few of them. One of them we've already talked about is that they're inflation protected. They protect you against inflation going up. Another one that you mentioned is they're tax deferred. You don't happen to owe taxes until you cash them out on there. Although you actually get an option, because I think you said in there that you can actually choose to pay the taxes on the interest, and that might work out better for some people. You can do that if you want. Although speaking of taxes, you mentioned that they're free from state and local taxation. So you earn however much money from the I-bonds, you pay taxes on your federal taxes on that interest, but you don't pay it on your state and local. And that's just a kind of an old court ruling, but it's like the opposite of municipal bonds. A lot of people maybe have heard of municipal bonds that are state and local bonds, and you don't pay the federal taxes on it. This is the opposite. You get interest from the federal government through the I-bond, and you don't have to put that on your state and local taxes to pay that. So a lot of different options that are listed in there, or benefits that are listed in there. Jemima, let's just talk about maybe what are some of the downsides to an I-bond? Why would somebody maybe not want to look into the I-bonds?
Well, I get a lot of feedback from people that say, well, you can only buy $10,000 a year per person. And they'll say, well, that's just, it's an insignificant amount as part of their portfolio, and so they don't want to do it. It's just too small of an amount to make a difference. The funny thing is, I'll tell you that I-bonds are very, very popular investment among wealthy people, believe it or not. And it surprises me, but they scheme all sorts of ways to get more I-bonds, and some of these ways. I mean, because you can do the tax return and get another $5,000 as part of your refund. Because it's a capital preservation investment. It's not to get rich. It's just to preserve your capital. And that's why I think wealthy people tend to like I-bonds. But that is a limit. The $10,000 a limit is a negative. However, that means a married couple could do $20,000 a year. And if you do $20,000 a year for 10 years, you're going to have a $200,000 base there.
Right.
That's a pretty good amount of money to have inflation protected. So it is a negative, and a lot of people beg the Treasury to raise the rate. I personally beg all the time to maybe make it $20,000 per person a year. It used to be $35,000 per person. Oh wow! And then they dropped it to $5,000 and then it went up. And I think 2008 or so they raised it to 2011. I think they raised it to 10, where it is now. So it's never been adjusted for inflation. It's just 10. Otherwise, some people don't like Treasury Direct. You have to buy them in electronic form through Treasury Direct. I don't mind Treasury Direct. I find it fairly easy to use. I wrote an article about how to open an account there. It's not that difficult to do. Sure. But you can't just go to the bank and buy an I-bond anymore.
That's kind of like the old way, right?
Now, I can't do it anymore. You have to buy it there's only 2 ways you can buy it: at Treasury Direct, or you can ask for it as in lieu of a tax refund on your federal return. And then the other, I suppose a negative for some people is the real return is 0. 0% of real return, meaning it will exactly match inflation. But some people think that's not adequate. They want something higher. In order to get something higher, you have to take risk. So it's not a risky investment. It's the opposite of a risky investment.
Exactly.
If you want risk, you won't like it.
Very true. Very true. I suppose another downside too is that if you cash out before the first 5 years are done, you lose the prior 3 months interest, which is why you point out. Actually, let's get to this. One thing, I was looking through your website. I figure there's at least 3 secrets. Let me know if there's any more than the 3 I found. But we found 3 secrets to maximizing the I bonds that are out there. And one of them that you mentioned is you can get $5,000 more of I bonds from your tax return. You just fill out a tax form and say $5,000 on my tax refund. I'd like that to be sent to me as an I bond. So if you time it right, because you can always send in some extra money to the government, and you do it that way, you could do $10,000 per person. If there's 2 of you, there's 20 grand. But then you can get the $5,000 back as an I bond that way. So that's an interesting secret, a way to get a little bit more. Yeah. People that think 10,000 is not enough.
I think they may limit you to 5,000 per tax return. So unless you're filing separately, you wouldn't be able to do that. You would only be able to get 5,000. I've never done it, but a lot of people do it. I talk to people all the time who do it and ask for advice from me, and I'll say, I've never done it. And
sure, I
feel that buying 10,000 for 2 people, so a total of 20,000, is adequate for what I need, especially because, I have a lot of tips also invested over time. I've invested in tips. I have that backup inflation protection.
You got it.
What people do, I think what people generally do, especially if they're retired, is they pay estimated taxes over the amount that they think they'll owe, and then they'll be able to do the 5,000 I bond, a paper I bond.
Yeah, I'm looking at it here, and so it's Form 8888. So that's one secret to optimizing or maximizing your I bonds, is that if you happen to get a refund, you can choose on Form 8888. It says right there, Part 2, how much of this do you want as a bond purchase for your spouse? And so there you go. That's one of the secrets out there, a way to get a little bit more than the 10,000 per person. Although the way I'm reading it too, and neither one of us are accountants, but I got a feeling you're probably right on that 5,000 per tax return is about the max. But that's okay.
I'm not positive of that, but I think that's true.
It just kind of seems that way. But hey, give it a shot and ask your accountant. Maybe they ought to know, right? Another one you were telling me is you should time your purchases very well. You said if you purchased at the end of the month and sold at the beginning of the month, how does that work? That's an advantage?
So you can buy an I bond or EE bond, for that matter, any savings bond, near the last day of the month. I generally advise, on Treasury Direct, you can set the date for your purchase. And I generally advise people to set the date like 2 days before the end of the month, so nothing gets tripped up and it gets pushed into the next month. But if you buy any date during a month, you get credit for a full month.
Okay.
So if you buy near let's say if you bought on, October 29th, they'll be buy on the 28th or something like that. You would get credit for the full month of October. Then next year, when October rolls around, you can redeem. So that 1 year is now up. So you've cut the holding period to 11 months.
Oh, so you're saying you could buy like October. Okay. So you could buy October 29th, but then October 1st hits and you can sell it a year later.
A year later. So you've kept it to, 11 months and a day, I say, is the holding period. You could redeem, and you will earn, even with the 3% penalty, you're going to make about 5%, or 3.5%, I think, for the year. If you take
with that 3-month penalty.
3-month penalty, but 3.5% is much better than you can earn anywhere else safely.
Yeah. Well, the final secret that I saw, tell me if there's any more here, but you were telling me, or on the website too, if you're going to lose a prior 3 months of interest and you're looking at this 12 months from now and you hear what the new rate's going to be and you don't like that new rate, some people see that and say, the new rate's going to be low, let me get out of it. And your suggestion would be, unless you absolutely need the money, if you don't like the new rate, it's too low for you, wait the 3 months and let them take away the new rate, take away the lower interest rate. Because if you get kind of ticked about the new rate and cash it out right away, you'll lose the last 3 months that's a high rate. Wait the next 3 months and say, fine, you keep your low interest that they're going to renew it at. And so maybe a lot of people ought to look at this more like a 15-month type of holding period at a minimum, because if they like the next 12 months and then they don't like what happens after that, well, just wait the 3 months. So it's only the lower interest that you lose out on.
Yeah, if they wait the 15 months, they would be getting over 5% for 15 months because you'd lose the last 3 months. But
yeah.
So whatever, there have been times the variable rate's been very low. That's a good time to sell if you have to wait.
Yeah.
You have to hold them 5 years. You have to hold them 5 years before you avoid the 3% 3-month penalty. And a lot of times the rate, you're talking about $10,000. So if the interest rate was only 1%, it's not very much money. It's going to be $10, $20. It's really not that much. But when you're getting this much, maybe 7%, you're going to want to probably hang on to that for an extra 3 months to make sure you get the full benefit of that 7%.
Well, Dave, you've given us a masterclass in about 25 minutes on tips and I-bonds, and I've absolutely loved it. Anyone that's interested in learning more, I'd encourage them to go to your website. It's tipswatch.com, TIPS watch.com. I'm seeing right on the front page, I see inflation and I-bonds, information about Social Security COLA. You might not think that I-bonds or tips are right for you, but a lot of people we talk to are facing retirement or in retirement, and go right to one of the experts on Social Security COLA to see what that might be looking at, and just so much good information that's out there. Before we head out, Dave, any final words of wisdom or anything you'd like to share with us?
No, I appreciate your having me to participate in this, and I do really strongly urge people just to take a look at I-bonds, whether you go to my site or not, go to Treasury Direct and look at them there. But you can find that they really are a unique investment that I think is very underappreciated and unknown, because generally, and this, I'm giving you a lot of credit for this, financial advisors rarely will talk about a savings bond because there's no money in it, or it's too boring for one thing, and I really appreciate that you're raising this issue for your clients. That's a great thing to do.
Yeah. Thank you for those words. It's been fun. It started about last December 2020. Got so many calls in a row with people whose CDs were renewing. They used to be at 2, they're getting down to 0.5, and everyone's saying, "Hey, this bank money, what do I do with it?" I said, "Well, you want to keep it that type of interest type of money. You're not looking to put it in the market, things like that. Hey, you're our clients. Let's figure this out with you." And so we've done a couple webinars. We've been trying to say, here's some different ideas on what you could do a little bit better. That's why I was so interested in May when there was a lot of news around the I-bonds. And I thought, well, I'll look a little bit more into it. And then all of a sudden I did some more research and realized how it's going to look for October and beyond, and thought, we got to get this information out to people that if this applies to you, like you said, look into it and figure out if this is the right thing for you. So it's been fun to learn about it. It's been fun to share that information. That's what we like to do, is just educate people about the different ways they can improve their retirement.
Yeah, and by the way, I do recommend buying in October and getting that 3.5% rate for 6 months, because we don't know what's going to happen next year. I mean, the inflation rate could drop. It could be higher, but you'll get it anyways if it's higher. So I think it's a good idea to go ahead and get that 3.5% for 6 months. Then you get the extra 6.9 or 7% for 6 months, annualized. I think I would recommend buying in October and not waiting till November and waiting for the higher rate to kick in, because you will get the full benefit of that higher rate.
There you go. When I wrote about why in my website, I'm sure you've got it as well too, but that was part of the article I had wrote, is that some people were suggesting and thinking, well, I'll just wait for the better rate. But you express it right there. Why, if you're somebody that's going to be doing this and you're listening to this in October, look at it now, because if you're going to do it, you're better off knowing what your 12-month rate is than taking a gamble at what the 6-month rate would be, 6 months down the road. So there you go. I think we'll end with that, because that's some great words of advice there. And I just want to thank you, Dave. Thanks for coming on. It's been a lot of fun. Love your website. Love the tipswatch.com website. Encourage everyone to go out there and take a look at it. And I want to thank all our listeners for joining us on the Retirement Revealed podcast. We believe if you know more about your money, you will feel better about your money and you will make better money decisions.
Thank you for listening to the Retirement Revealed podcast. Click on the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit retirement-revealed.com to learn more. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Keil Financial Partners. Keil Financial Partners does not provide legal, accounting, or tax advice. Consult your attorney or tax professional. Representatives have general knowledge of the Social Security tenets. For complete details on your situation, contact the Social Security Administration. Keil Financial Partners is a part of the Thrivent Advisor Network, a registered investment advisor. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.